After sending his text message, Charlie kept receiving text replies. The first to reply was Warnia. "Mr. Wade, don't worry. I will definitely come over to congratulate your wife tomorrow." After that, Graham replied, "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Wade. I will definitely come over to join you for the opening ceremony tomorrow." Zeke replied, "Mr. Wade, I will make sure to bring my son and nephew along with me to congratulate your wife tomorrow. After all, I really want those two rascals to apologize to you in person." In fact, everyone was very excited to receive Charlie's invitation because they felt that it was a good opportunity for them to get closer to him. Claire initially had some qualms about her opening ceremony tomorrow. She would never have expected her husband to prepare a grand opening ceremony for her. After getting back home, Claire quickly washed up so that she could rest earlier and prepare for the opening ceremony of her studio tomorrow morning. Charlie also went to bed early that night, and all that he thought about that night was how he was going to make his wife the most talked-about person in Oris Hill tomorrow. The next day was the day that Claire had scheduled for the opening ceremony of her studio. As Claire did not have much money since she was just starting her own business, Claire rented a small office in the slightly remote Bright Star building. Even though Bright Star building was a subsidiary property owned by Grand Group, it was not worth mentioning at all. Grand Group could not be bothered to operate the building on their own, and they rented the office units out to some intermediary companies. Initially, Charlie was planning to ask Doris to vacate one of the floors in Bright Star building for his wife to use as her office. However, as he thought about it, he felt it would be too difficult to explain it to Claire. Therefore, he decided to allow Claire to use her own money to rent a small office in the building instead. At this time, Charlie and Claire were both standing outside of the small office as they waited for the arrival of the guests. Claire had already sent some invitation letters out to several partners that she used to work with in Wilson Group in the past, and she even plucked up the courage to send an invitation letter to Doris from Emgren Group. However, she was still a little nervous because she did not know if any of those guests would show up. It was very difficult for her to start up a company on her own, and if her opening ceremony was a failure, everyone in the industry would definitely look down on her. When Charlie saw the anxious expression on Claire's face, he quickly assured and comforted her. "My dear wife, it's still early. When the time comes, all the guests will definitely be here. Don't worry too much about it." The scheduled opening time was 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was just a little after 9 o'clock right then. Therefore, it was only normal that no one had arrived yet at that time. A short while later, Claire suddenly received a phone call. After answering the call, she found out that it was the receptionist at the front desk of Bright Star Building, informing her in advance that the Wilson family was here to visit. When Charlie heard the voice over the phone, he was very surprised. "The Wilson family? What are they doing here? Did you send them an invitation letter?" Claire shook her head before she said, "Why would I invite them to my opening ceremony after our disagreement? Perhaps the reason why they're here today is to laugh at me. The receptionist told me that Grandma came here in person with my uncle's family. Charlie, I hope you won't have a confrontation with them later." Charlie nodded before he smiled and said, "As long as they don't try to stir up any trouble, I promise not to engage in any arguments with them. Today is supposed to be a happy day." Claire nodded, the frown between her eyes indicating her anxiety. Soon, from the outside passage, Lady Wilson's slow walking pace sounded, paired with the sound of her cane hitting the floor. Behind her were Christopher, Harold, and Wendy. Harold, who was beaten up and arrested some time ago, had just been bailed out by Lady Wilson from the police station. Thus, he was full of resentment and hatred as he glared at Charlie. Charlie, of course, couldn't care less. Today was his wife's office's opening ceremony. He didn't want to have any conflict with these hooligans. He would not jump on them as long as they kept themselves decent. Wendy walked ahead and sneered, "Claire, you didn't even say hi to Grandma. When did you become so rude?" Claire replied flatly, "I was kicked out of the Wilson family, so in other words, we are not related." "Damn it!" Lady Wilson banged her cane to the ground hard and said furiously, "You are a descendant of the Wilson family, and we are related by blood. You were born as one of us, and when you die, you'll be our family's ghost too." Charlie said sarcastically, "You're a little double standard, aren't you? When you kicked her out of your family, you said that she was not part of your family, yet now you claim that she is one of you, alive or dead. Isn't that a little too contradicting? Harold grit his teeth and said, "Shut up, loser. You don't have any say here." Charlie glared back at him. "Did you not have enough punches the other day? Do you want me to loosen you up a little?" Harold cowardly shrank his neck inward like a turtle and stepped aside. He had already tasted Charlie's strength firsthand when he had tried to take over the villa, so he now knew that he was not on par with Charlie regardless of the number of people he had. Hence, the best he could do was to remain silent. Claire pursed her lips and turned her gaze toward Lady Wilson, saying, "Sorry, you are not welcome at my opening ceremony today. Please leave now." "Opening ceremony?" Lady Wilson burst out in disdain. "Claire, do you truly think that someone will come to your door if you operate a small studio like this?" Christopher giggled contemptuously and chimed in, "I heard that you even sent an invitation to Emgrand Group, am I right? Did it ever cross your mind how the Emgrand Group would look at your tiny little office?" "That's right," Lady Wilson interjected. "Claire, after all, we are a family. It's important to stay united and in accord. You are my granddaughter. You have my blood in your body. How long do you want to fight with me?" She continued with her brainwashing. "Look at you, working in such a dilapidated office by yourself without any money or resources. Why don't you come back to the Wilson Group? I'll let you be the director just like before, and you can work for me like you always did. I'll give you the shares of the company and even elect you as the successor. What do you say?" The Wilson family was not doing very well now. The Emgrand Group had broken off their collaboration with them and even blacklisted them, and in addition to that, the White family had called off their engagement with Wendy. She couldn't count on Harold at all. Lady Wilson's only hope was to get Claire back to her company, and hopefully, it could break the unfortunate chain and make a breakthrough in their business. Maybe Claire could even get the Emgrand Group's contract back. That way, the other companies would come to them for more projects, and she could reverse their situation in no time. Never did Lady Wilson expect that Claire would simply shake her head and say calmly, "Thanks, but no thanks. I'm not interested. I just want to do my own thing." Christopher sneered. "Claire, I suggest you have some self-consciousness. Don't you see how desolate your office is at your opening ceremony? Did anyone come to congratulate you? Do you honestly think you can make it work? I bet you'll go bankrupt before you start." Charlie's expression was full of disdain. "It's none of your business. I can make the prominent figures in Oris Hill come and congratulate Claire whenever I want." Harold smirked and said in a sarcastic tone, "Charlie, go ahead with your drama. I bet your so-called acquaintances are just some low-life gangsters and nobodies. Do you really think you're so influential and powerful? I don't believe you're able to invite any prominent figures." Wendy chimed in on the sarcastic bandwagon. "A loser like Charlie is best at bragging. If no one attends your opening ceremony, you and this office will become Oris Hill's laughingstocks. Let's see how you'll get jobs or projects then." Claire didn't show any expression as she listened to the insults, but anxiety slowly brewed in her heart. To put it bluntly, opening ceremonies were occasions that displayed company owners' network connections and resources. If many guests were to attend the opening ceremony, it would show that the company had a strong business network and foundation, especially if VIPs were among the guests. Such news would spread around their circle, and many people would regard the company as reliable and trustworthy. However, if they didn't have any guests on the day, it was like making an announcement to the public that their company had no network connections and resources. No one would dare seek the company even for the tiniest project. It would be a great pleasure if Emgrand Group could send someone to attend the opening ceremony, but Claire wasn't certain if they would entertain her. At that moment, Lady Wilson spoke. "Claire, look around you. It's almost 10 now, but there's no one here except us. I don't think you can gain anything in this small office. Why don't you return to Wilson Group and help us? Not only would you have a steady job, but it's also better than receiving cold stares from others." When the Wilson family found out that Claire's company was about to open, they contacted some previous partners who had good relationships with them and asked them not to attend her opening ceremony. They obliged after learning that Claire was part of the Wilson family and declared that they would not collaborate with her in the future. That was also why Lady Wilson was confident that there would not be any distinguished guests today. It would devastate Claire even further, and she would be able to control her better in the future. Indeed, Claire was very anxious and agitated right now. She bit her lips and stomped nervously. Charlie took her hand and said in an earnest tone, "Dear, so what if there aren't any guests today? I'm here with you, and that's enough." Claire looked back at him, nodding with a smile and feeling a warmth wrapping her heart. Lady Wilson, on the other hand, sneered and said, "Charlie, you're overly confident, aren't you? What good are you here? Can you bring big shots here? Can you get her projects and jobs? Without the support of Wilson Group, you're driving yourself to a dead end." Charlie said arrogantly, "Claire's company will definitely only get better. Wilson Group in its heyday is nothing to Claire, let alone Wilson Group that is on the verge of bankruptcy. To be more successful than she was with you guys is a piece of cake for Claire." "Huh, cocky fellow!" Lady Wilson felt that she was greatly insulted upon hearing Charlie say that Wilson Group was on the verge of bankruptcy, and Claire could do better than Wilson Group in its glorious moment. She stomped her cane to the floor angrily and growled, "You're just a loser who married into our family. How dare you raise your voice here?" Charlie smiled slyly. "Raise my voice? Ha ha, I'm just stating the facts. If you don't believe me, let's just wait and see." Harold sneered. "All right, Charlie. We'll wait and see if you can expand this company." The minutes passed by and the opening ceremony was approaching. Claire was getting more and more flustered. She kept shifting her gaze between her watch and the main door. Charlie tried to comfort her to no avail. He was perplexed and casual, though. He had already sent an invitation to Emgren Group, so Doris Young would and must attend. She was probably preparing the gift since she was not here yet. Christopher put on a pompous expression and said, "Well, do you still think you're so well connected?" It was almost 10 o'clock. If there were any guests coming, they would have arrived at the door by then. However, the entrance was empty and quiet. Apparently, no one would show up. Wendy said in a cocky tone, "Dad, the loser said it doesn't matter if they have no guests today. He alone is enough. I wonder how powerful he is. Does he really think he's somebody here in Oris Hill?" At this moment, the voice from the front desk resonated from a distance away. It seemed that she deliberately raised her voice. "Announcing the arrival of Mr. Travis Lane of Lancaster." Travis Lane. Charlie was a little bewildered. The last time he had met Travis was when the White family brought Jack Yaleman to set up the metaphysics competition, and he killed Jack by summoning the Thunder Order. He didn't invite him to his wife's opening ceremony. Why was he here? The Wilson family was equally stunned. Travis Lane, the richest man in Lancaster? Why was he here? As soon as Travis arrived at the door, he walked straight into the office where Charlie was standing. The Wilson family exchanged surprise and peculiar glances with each other. Christopher walked ahead and said, "I met a businessman from Lancaster a few days ago, and I heard he's quite close to Travis Lane. Could it be that he'd introduced me to Travis Lane?" Then Christopher spruced up his attire and went ahead to greet him. Lady Wilson and the rest of the clan didn't dare to be cocky. They followed him sheepishly. As the chubby Travis walked into the office, he ignored Christopher, who marched forward to greet him. Instead, he went straight to Charlie and said in a shrill tone, Mr. Wade, I've finally made it." As everyone watched in bewilderment, Charlie nodded calmly and asked, "Why are you here?" Travis said respectfully, "Mr. Wade, it is your wife's new office's opening ceremony today. I must come to congratulate you and your wife." Christopher caught up with them and interjected with a wide smile on his face. "Hi, Mr. Lane, you're here. Let's go inside and have a chat. It's not appropriate for you to stand here and talk." Travis was trying to butter Charlie up, so he was agitated when someone interrupted their conversation. His smiling face suddenly darkened, and he squinted at Christopher like a king staring at a lowly peasant before he said coldly, "Who are you? Don't you see that I'm talking to Mr. Wade?" Awkwardly, Christopher cleared his throat and tried again. "I'm Christopher Wilson. May I know if Mr. Mark from Lancaster even mentioned me to you?" Travis frowned irritatedly and said, "I don't know you, and I certainly don't know any Mr. Mark. I'm here today to congratulate Mrs. Wade on her office's opening." Travis Lane's remark sent a shockwave across the office, and the Wilson family members blinked in astonishment. Did he actually come to congratulate Claire? He was the richest man in Lancaster. When and how did Charlie and Claire strike up the relationship with him? Christopher was utterly shocked. He had never expected the man to be so rude to him and snap at him right in front of everyone. Embarrassed, he quickly retreated and stood aside. Wendy frowned in confusion and whispered to Harold, Hey, is this chubby man really the richest man in Lancaster? Why does he feel like an actor hired to impersonate as a ploy to fool us? Why would any prominent figure be so kind and respectful to a loser? Harold shook his head and whispered back, Yeah, I don't think he's real, too. None of the people present had ever seen Travis Lane before, but they had heard the rumors about his notoriety and strictness in managing his business. The man looked nothing like the version in the rumors as he talked softly and gently with Charlie. Travis took out an exquisite box from his bag and handed it to Claire. Mrs. Wade, congratulations on the opening of your company. Please accept my little gift. Claire was a little astonished. She didn't invite Travis, nor did she even know him, so she was wondering if she should accept the gift. Charlie smiled and nudged her softly. Dear, it's a congratulatory gift. You should accept it. Claire took the box shyly and wanted to put the box away, but Wendy urged from behind her, Claire, it's a gift from Mr. Lane. Shouldn't you let us take a look? Yeah, Mr. Lane is a big boss with a net worth of hundreds of billions of dollars. His gift must be very expensive, Harold added. Claire looked at Charlie for a hint, then slowly unwrapped the box under everyone's gaze. Inside the exquisite gift box was a crystal-clear jade pendant. The pendant had no impurities at all, and the emerald jade sparkled under the light, illuminating its translucent and bright texture. Lady Wilson locked her gaze at the pendant as if her eyes were hooked on the jade completely. She recognized the pendant. It was the breezy moon that was auctioned off at Eastcliff some time ago. It was sold at a high price of $50 million to an ultra-rich man in Lancaster. She had never thought that the buyer was actually Travis. Her eyes turned green as she stared at the pendant. If the Wilson family got hold of it, it could reverse their misfortune. Wendy said in an envious tone, Huh? I didn't know that someone would actually come here. I wonder what kind of luck they've had to have known Mr. Lane. As she finished, the front desk's loud announcement resonated again. Miss Claire Wilson, your congratulatory gifts are here. It was followed by an ear-deafening rumbling coming from outside. Everyone walked out of the building, and when they looked up, they saw how the square of the building had been cleared, and a huge helicopter was slowly descending. Then, the entire staff of the building started to get busy. They moved one flower basket after another, and one gift after another from the helicopter into Claire's office. The entire building started to get very lively and chaotic all of a sudden. A simple opening ceremony had created such an extravagant scene that even involved a helicopter. Everyone poked their heads to look at the few people standing in front of the office. Claire was in a daze. She had indeed invited some people, but they were not very close to her, and she didn't know anyone who could afford a helicopter. Someone in the crowd exclaimed, Isn't that flower basket the legendary Tiffany limited edition? I heard that one flower basket costs more than $1 million. Wow, look at all those flowers. I don't think I've ever seen them before. They're so beautiful. These are Dutch tulips. The exclusive Dutch tulips are very expensive. A single bulb can cost anywhere from thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars. And there's even blue enchantress hydrangeas and Juliet roses. Wow, these are all rare flowers. You can't cultivate them here in our country. They can only be airlifted from abroad. It's no wonder they needed to dispatch a helicopter. I guess they were transported here directly via helicopter upon arrival at the airport from abroad. From the looks of it, the Tiffany flower basket alone costs $1 million, while those precious flowers also cost $500,000 per basket. There are a total of 20 baskets, so the total price of those flowers is more than $5 million, am I right? Oh my God, who would be so generous to gift flower baskets costing $5 million for an opening ceremony? Yes, moreover, the flowers won't survive for long. They'll wither within days. This is so lavish. Lady Wilson, who was witnessing the scene, gulped anxiously. She loved to plant flowers, and the Wilson family villa's garden was filled with various kinds of flowers that she had planted herself. However, she felt heavy-hearted to buy the bulbs of the rare flowers from abroad due to their expensive price tag, especially the most classic red and white tulips from the Netherlands, which could cost up to 10 grand. Wendy watched the scene, and her eyes widened. Then she turned to Lady Wilson and whispered, Grandma, I remember that you really liked the Dutch tulips, but you didn't buy them because they were too expensive and resorted to cheaper local tulips which cost a few $100s instead. How can these people give Claire such a valuable gift? Wendy's words echoed into Lady Wilson's ears. She gritted her teeth in jealousy when she thought of her cheap local tulips, which paled in comparison to Claire's Dutch tulips. She wondered if she could take a few and plant them in her garden to see if they could survive. At this moment, the front desk shouted, "Announcing the arrival of Miss Doris Young, the vice chairman of Emgren Group, Miss Warnia Song, Mr. Zeke White, Mr. Graham Quinton, and Douglas Simmons to the opening ceremony of Mrs. Wade's company." The announcement not only surprised the Wilson family, but it also shocked the entire staff of Bright Star Building. Although Emgren Group owned the building, they rarely intervened in the activities here. Unexpectedly, the vice chairman, as well as so many of Oris Hill's prominent figures, had actually come to this humble building to attend Claire's opening ceremony. The sudden appearance of so many VIPs at Bright Star Building had added a mesmerizing blast to the building. It also made people wonder about Claire's background. They were curious as to how she had invited so many big shots to her opening ceremony. The Wilson family members were also dumbfounded and wondered how any of this could happen to Claire. Claire herself was equally dumbstruck. Hearing these names was enough to make her jump in jittery. After all, the Wilson family was in despair right now, and she knew full well that she could only be regarded as a poor and ordinary newcomer who had just started her business. She hadn't even had a foundation of her reputation in Oris Hill yet. So why did these big shots attend her opening ceremony? Was it because of her husband, Charlie? A passage appeared immediately as the crowd of onlookers made way and stood to the side as if there were invisible barriers. Doris and Warnia, two charming belles who donned very formal and elegant dresses with smiles on their faces, walking side by side from outside towards the door. Behind them were Zeke White along with Kevin and Gerald, Graham Quinton along with Aurora and Stuart, and Douglas Simmons and his granddaughter, Zyla. They walked in a group like a team of Avengers. Orville Hong walked behind the pack. Wendy's eyes widened in shock and disbelief as she stared at the scene. These people were all prominent figures in Oris Hill that rarely appeared in public places, but they gathered here to congratulate Claire, which made her envious and agitated. She was always on her high horse previously with her background as the daughter of a wealthy family and one of the most outstanding young people in the city. She was pretty and attractive, tall and slim, and she was regarded as one of the beautiful goddesses of the upper social class of the city. She had been competing with her cousin in all aspects for so many years. She thought that she had found a good husband and could finally crush her cousin, but now everything she had paled in comparison to Claire. Her family she was so proud of was like a pile of rubbish compared to the guests that Claire invited. There was a huge gap between her and Claire. "Claire, what kind of shitty jackpot did you strike?" Wendy glared at Claire and growled with an undisguised tone of jealousy. Claire ignored her simply because she was in a trance as well. She nudged Charlie and asked, "Did you invite these people?" Charlie nodded. "Yes, I've provided them with some feng shui and fortune-telling services, and I built my friendships with them from there." Claire sighed heavily and massaged her forehead dejectedly. She had repeatedly told Charlie not to deceive people with these unreliable methods. Not only did he ignore her warnings, but he had expanded his service of deception and extended his claws to the prominent figures now. What if these people found out about his deception eventually? They would be dead meat. She wanted to persuade Charlie to stop, but before she could speak, Doris and Warnia had already stood in front of them. Warnia spoke first. She glanced at Claire unobtrusively, then stretched out her hand and said with a polite smile, "Mrs. Wade, congratulations on your opening day. I hope you can extend your business to us if we need any design services in the future." The Wilson family stared at the scene, dumbfounded. It was obvious that Warnia was handing the business into Claire's hand, but it sounded like Warnia was humbly asking for Claire's help. What did Claire do to receive such a humble reaction from Miss Song? Claire offered her hand nervously and shook Warnia's hand. She said in a rather anxious and shrill tone, "Thank you, Miss Song." While they were talking, Warnia was checking Claire out and vice versa. In terms of physical appearance, Warnia and Claire were on par, but Claire could never be at the same level when it came to the natural, noble, and elegant temperament. Claire couldn't help but feel a little inferior when she thought of it. Warnia started, "Mrs. Wade, you are Master Wade's wife, which means you are my patron too, so please be casual around me." Sure enough, they were here because of Charlie. Upon hearing that, Claire took a peek at Charlie, who was greeting the other guests, and somehow a tinge of jealousy slowly arose inside her. She did not expect that the distinguished daughter of the Song family would respect her husband so much. He was full of mystery right now. Then Doris approached them, shook hands with Claire, and said, "Congratulations, Mrs. Wade. M Grand Group has several projects that are awaiting your discussion." "Seriously?" Claire exclaimed in shock. Previously, the $60 million contract with M Grand Group was enough to make the whole Wilson family excited and thrilled. She would be on cloud nine if she could get a $6 million contract from them. Doris smiled and answered, "Of course, Mrs. Wade. We now have a total of nearly $300 million in interior design and renovation projects. We'll have the contract ready right away if you can accept and manage it." The Wilson family, who were listening to their conversation, had their jaws opened so wide that they almost dropped to the floor. A $300 million project? They wanted to give it all to Claire? Could someone knock some sense into the vice chairman of Emgren Group? With their power and status, why would they want to flatter the insignificant Claire? If the Wilson family could get a mere 10% of the entire project, it was enough to reverse their misery and stabilize their company. Lady Wilson felt as if someone had stomped on her heart repeatedly. If she had known that Claire was so capable, she would pull her back to the family even if she had to kneel in front of her. With this playing in her mind, she decided that she had to get Claire back no matter what, along with M Grand Group's projects. At this moment, Zeke brought his son Kevin and his nephew Gerald to approach Charlie and Claire. Zeke started, "Mrs. Wade, congratulations and best wishes on your grand opening. You are the first the White family will approach when we have any interior design and renovation projects in the future." Flattered, Claire hurriedly said, "Thank you, Mr. White." Kevin and Gerald stepped forward and said in a respectful tone, "Congratulations, Mrs. Wade." The two men were so submissive and humble, and they trembled when they saw Charlie. Charlie had become the guardian angel of their family right now, so their respect for Claire was genuine and sincere. Wendy, who was standing not far away, watched the White family approaching Charlie and Claire with agitation and irritation. Staring at Gerald, whom she had always loved so much, she felt bitter and miserable. She was supposed to marry him by now. She was supposed to be his wife and the daughter-in-law of the White family. But he was treating her like a stranger. Not only did he block and blacklist all her contact information, but he also didn't even bother to look at her. The scene that frustrated her the most was that the man she loved so much was being so respectful and gracious around Claire. She had become the total loser in this scenario. Wendy couldn't help it anymore. With tears rolling down her cheeks, she barged forward, grabbed Gerald's arm, and said, "Gerald, my dear Gerald, why didn't you call me?" A layer of thin ice covered Gerald's face. He took his arm out of Wendy's clutch and said coldly, "Sorry, I have nothing to do with you right now. I'm here to congratulate Master and Mrs. Wade. Please behave yourself." "Me? Behave myself?" Wendy wailed loudly, her tears flowing like two streams of rivers. "Gerald White, we've been together for so many years, and I was your fiancé. I even carried your child, and now you want me to behave myself? You used me, then dumped me. You behave yourself first." Wendy was feeling so sad and hurt right then. She had invested all her hopes and dreams of a beautiful and happy life on Gerald alone, but he pushed her into the abyss of misery with his own hands. Not only did he dump her after messing up her feelings, but he even showed such strong dislike and disgust towards her in front of so many people. It was totally unacceptable. Her wrath of fury nearly exploded right there and then. Gerald was unusually calm and emotionless at her wailing and accusation. He said coldly, "It's normal to fall in love and break up. What has it to do with respect? Please stop pestering me." Charlie walked towards them as he assumed Wendy was about to cause a scene. Blood drained from Gerald's face as Charlie came at them and quickly explained, for fear that Charlie would dismiss him for this situation. "Master Wade, please calm down. It was this shameless bitch who jumped at me and threw a tantrum." Wendy glared at the exchange in shock. Gerald, who was quite fond of her in the past, had cast her aside like an old shoe now. Moreover, he even called her a shameless bitch in order to curry favor with Charlie. She was so infuriated. All her patience went out the window at this moment. She roared hysterically. "Are you all fucking blind? Charlie is just a fucking moocher, a loser. Why do you bow at him like he is some kind of king? Why?" Gerald sucked in a breath in bewilderment. He slapped her and shouted, "Shut up, you bitch! Who do you think you are? How dare you criticize Master Wade? I'll kill you right now!" Lady Wilson was agitated as she watched her beloved granddaughter being humiliated. She walked up and said coldly, "Mr. White, please control your nephew. He's going overboard." "Going overboard?" Zeke squinted at her and sneered. Truth be told, if not for Mrs. Wade's grand opening day today, I'd break her leg for what she's just said. I simply don't want to spoil the mood today. Then, he continued, "Besides, who the fuck do you think you are? You want me to control my nephew? Do you think I'm unaware that it was you who ordered Harold Wilson to snatch the villa that I gave to Master Wade, you old witch? I spared you because of Master and Mrs. Wade. If you blurt another nonsensical statement from your mouth, I'll slap you. Try me." Lady Wilson could feel a chill running up her spine, and she began to tremble in fear. She was so used to being a tyrant in the Wilson family, and she wanted to establish the same domineering image when she was out of the house, but she had lost power. However, even if she still retained her influence, she had no right to criticize Zeke to his face. If he really jumped on her and slapped her, there was nothing she could do about it. So she frantically blurted, "Mr. White, I'm sorry, it's my fault. I'm being irrational and rash. Please forgive me." Zeke squinted at her like she was a disgusting creature and snarled, "Get lost, then!" She sheepishly did as he said and stood at the side immediately. Wendy, on the other hand, had lost her mind due to the devastating blow. She stretched her arms abruptly and hugged Gerald while pleading, "Gerald, why are you so cold towards me? I love you very much. I've always loved you. I gave you my everything, my body, my heart, everything. Why did you call off our engagement? Please, I beg you, please give me another chance. Let us start over, okay?" Gerald was aggravated as Wendy clung onto him stubbornly like a koala. His face was filled with annoyance as he tried to break free from her clutches to no avail. Gerald was fully aware that he had nearly offended Master Wade because he was deceived and brainwashed by these fools. Fortunately, Master Wade was the bigger person and forgave his wrongdoings. Otherwise, he would have brought disastrous harm to his entire white family. Now this shameless Wendy had the nerve to attempt reconciling with him. It was like pushing him back into the fire pit. He shoved Wendy away and kicked her in the stomach as she fell to the floor and growled, "Wendy Wilson, from now on, get the hell away from me. If you come at me again, I swear to God I'm going to kill you." Wendy sat on the floor in a trance as if she had been struck by lightning. Looking back at Gerald's face in a furious grimace, she found it so strange and unfamiliar. He didn't look like the man who was once in love with her at all. Although Claire was a little agitated by Wendy, they were cousins, after all. She couldn't bear seeing her being insulted like this, so she said to Gerald, "Mr. White, you and Wendy were once in love. Even if you can't be lovers, you don't have to be enemies, do you?" Gerald immediately bowed to Claire and uttered, "Yes, Mrs. Wade, it is my mistake for handling it badly. Please forgive me." Wendy stared in disbelief. Gerald was so ruthless and harsh to her, yet he was treating Claire with full respect. She turned her head at Claire. Instead of feeling grateful, her heart was filled with hatred and resentment, as if it was shouting, "It was that bitch Claire. It was all her fault for what happened to me right now." Had it not been for the bitch and that deadbeat moocher husband of hers, she would have married Gerald by now. She would have lived a happy life as the wealthy Mrs. White, and she could bring the Wilson family to a higher level. The Wilson family would not have been reduced to such a pitiful level. "It is all your fault, Claire. Your fault. Your fault. You bitch!" The disheveled Wendy, with her bloodshot eyes, suddenly jumped up and rushed towards Claire with her arms extending at her. "Bitch! I'm going to kill you! It's all your fault! I'm going to kill you now!" Claire was shocked when Wendy suddenly ran towards her. She quickly moved backwards and tried to hide from her assault. Charlie grimaced in irritation and was about to hit Wendy when Orville marched forward and slapped Wendy hard on her face. She fell to the floor again. "Oh, shout indignantly, what are you? How dare you try to assault Mrs. Wade? I'll kill you!" He urged his men who stood behind him, "Come here, drag this bitch outside and give her a good beating." Two burly men in black came out from behind, pulled Wendy up and dragged her out. Christopher frantically called, "Please, my daughter is immature. Please forgive her." Orville's eyes were filled with irritation and anger. "What are you? Stop bugging me or I'll kill you too!"